Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are going to try to understand this whole idea of business acumen for medical affairs.
Okay.
We've got a bunch of videos from the Sky Health Learning Academy YouTube channel, and they've all got this same expert.
Right.
And it's interesting because, I don't know about you, but I feel like business and science don't always, get along perfectly.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what makes this deep dive really interesting.
Sure.
Like, how do you make really smart decisions when you've got limited resources?
Yeah.
How do you balance what's scientifically really interesting versus what actually makes business sense? And I feel like these are questions we all face, even outside of pharma, right?
Absolutely. It's about understanding that medical decisions aren't made in a vacuum, right?
Right.
They need to align with the broader business strategy to really be effective.
Yeah, it's like, you're designing a clinical trial, and you might have the most beautiful, scientific hypothesis, but if it's going to cost $1 zillion and take 10 years to complete, is that really the best way to use your resources?
Right.
And I think that's where this whole idea of business acumen comes in.
Exactly. It's about asking those really tough questions like what are the unmet needs in the market?
Uh-huh.
What are our competitors doing?
Right.
What are the regulatory hurdles?
Oh, for sure.
And most importantly, how is this decision going to impact the bottom line?
Right.
And ultimately benefit patients.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it's not just about being a scientific whiz, it's about being a strategic thinker, kind of like seeing the bigger picture.
For sure.
So in these videos, the expert talks about 3 reasons why business acumen is so crucial for medical affairs professionals.
Okay.
So what's the first one?
The first one is really informed and strategic decision making. So for example, let's say you're on a medical affairs team and you're kind of going back and forth about whether to invest in, say, a real-world evidence study
Okay.
to prove the long-term benefits of your drug, or maybe like an educational grant program for healthcare providers.
Got it.
So from a purely scientific viewpoint, the real-world evidence might look more appealing,
But if the business is really fighting to get reimbursement from insurance companies,
yeah.
maybe that educational grant to help providers figure out how to prescribe the drug,
Exactly.
maybe that's a better move, at least for the
Yeah.
short term. Yeah.
Precisely. It's about aligning your medical activities with the immediate business needs
Uh-huh.
while keeping your eye on the long-term scientific goals.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what's the second reason?
So the second one is resource allocation, which is always a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Especially in medical affairs. You always have limited budget, limited staff, limited time.
Always.
So business acumen helps you prioritize effectively. So let's say there's a company that is just launching a totally new drug. It's groundbreaking. It's for a rare disease. But their medical affairs team is still super focused on supporting an older product
Okay.
that isn't, as profitable.
Oh, that seems like a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Like the team's busy, kind of celebrating past wins, but they're missing out on some great opportunities.
Exactly.
To support this, game-changing therapy.
Right. They need to shift their focus and allocate resources
Yeah.
to where they're really going to have the biggest impact.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like being flexible, I guess.
Exactly.
Being responsive to the changing needs of the business.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm seeing how important all this is, but this third reason, like demonstrating the business impact, that feels a bit tricky to me.
Yeah.
How do you measure the impact of medical affairs when it's not directly tied to sales?
It's a common challenge, but it's not impossible to overcome. You need to kind of connect the dots between your activities and the overall business goal. So let's say you're running an educational program for physicians about a new treatment approach, right?
Okay, so I'm thinking how does educating these doctors translate into business value?
Well, you can, for example, track things like the number of physicians who've actually adopted that new approach,
Okay.
the improvements in patient outcomes,
Right.
even the reduction in healthcare costs associated with the new treatment.
All right.
And then you can connect those improvements back to the overall business strategy.
Okay, so it's about setting up really clear, measurable goals from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then showing how your work, adds to the bigger picture.
Right.
Even if it's not a direct sales impact.
Exactly. It's about thinking like a business leader, not just a scientist.
Okay.
And to help with that, the expert in these videos, they actually give you a practical tool.
Okay.
It's called the 6-question framework.
Ooh, I love a good framework. So what is it?
It's it's designed to guide you when you're making decisions,
Okay.
especially when you're facing some really tough choices and resources are limited.
Right.
So let's say you're trying to decide between 2 projects.
Okay.
So the first one is you're supporting research for a new drug, and it's for a rare disease. So let's call it Project Hope.
Okay. Project Hope.
And the second one, you're investing in a marketing campaign for an existing drug,
Okay.
but it's facing, increasing competition.
Wow.
So we'll call that one Project Steady.
Okay, so we've got Project Hope, which is potentially groundbreaking, but also high risk and for, a smaller group of patients.
Right.
And then Project Steady, which scientifically maybe not as exciting, but it's a product that we know works.
Yeah.
And it's got, a broader market reach.
Exactly.
It's like a classic medical affairs dilemma.
Yeah.
So how does this framework help me choose?
Well, the first question is, what is the strategy?
Okay.
So you have to really understand the overall business strategy.
Right.
And how each of these initiatives sort of fits into it. So is the company focused on growth in new markets?
Right.
Are they prioritizing rare diseases? Are they, kind of on the defensive against competitors,
Right.
things like that?
So if their strategy is all about, innovation
Yeah.
and getting into new areas,
Right.
then maybe Project Hope, even though it's risky, maybe that's a better fit.
Yeah.
But what if the strategy is more about, making the most money from the products they already have?
Well, then you move on to question number 2, which is, what are the goals and the metrics?
Right.
So what are you hoping to achieve with each project?
Right.
And how are you going to measure success?
Gotcha.
So are you aiming for, a bigger market share,
really?
better patient outcomes,
Right.
or something totally different? And then which project's metrics are more aligned with, the company's overall KPIs?
So I'm not just thinking about which project is, more interesting to me as a scientist.
Yeah.
Which one's more likely to make a difference in the things that the business really cares about?
Right.
Wow, this is making me rethink some of my old decisions.
Right. That's the power of this framework.
Yeah.
It really forces you to think strategically and consider every angle.
I like it.
So now let's say that both projects, they seem to fit in with the company's strategy and their goals.
Okay.
That's when you go to question 3, which is, what resources are available?
Right, because even the most brilliant idea is going to fail if you don't have, the people, the money,
Exactly.
and the time to actually make it happen.
For sure.
So if Project Hope, needs a huge investment in trials,
Yeah.
and you need a bunch of specialized scientists, and maybe you don't have those things right now,
Right.
then maybe Project Steady is the more realistic option, at least for now.
Yeah, exactly. Business acumen is all about making tough decisions.
Right.
And sometimes that means saying no to really exciting opportunities that just aren't feasible at the moment.
Wow, this framework is really, changing how I think about making decisions.
Right.
Like a checklist to make sure I'm thinking about everything.
Right.
Okay, so what's the next question?
All right, so question 4 brings us back to what's really important, right?
Okay.
The patients. So it asks, what are the specific patient needs for each of these tasks?
Got it.
So, which project addresses a more urgent need?
Uh-huh.
Which one has the potential to really have a bigger impact on people's lives?
So even if, Project Steady seems like the more logical choice from a business perspective,
Yeah.
if Project Hope is, going after a really serious disease with no current treatment options,
Yeah.
that has to be a big part of my decision.
Absolutely. Business acumen shouldn't overshadow ethical considerations and patient centricity.
Right, you've got to remember the human side of healthcare.
Exactly.
I like how this framework kind of balances business with that.
Right.
All right, so what about question 5?
Question 5 is all about assessing the risk and reward for each project. So it asks, what are the potential risks and benefits associated with each task?
All right. So with Project Hope, the potential reward is huge.
Right.
It could be this groundbreaking new treatment for a terrible disease.
Yeah.
But the risks are also huge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The research might fail. The trials might get delayed. The FDA might say no.
Exactly.
So Project Steady seems like a much safer bet, right?
Right.
The drug is already approved. We know there's a market for it. But, maybe the potential rewards aren't quite as big.
Precisely. It's about weighing the potential upside with the potential downside.
Right.
And making, a calculated decision.
It's like this framework is a compass, they're helping me navigate all these tough choices.
Right.
What's that final question?
Okay, so the sixth and final question, it helps you focus on really making the biggest impact possible.
Okay.
So it asks, how can we maximize the impact of our efforts?
Okay.
So even if both projects seem good, you got to ask yourself, which one's going to move the needle the most? Which one's going to make a real difference for both patients and for the business?
This is amazing. I'm already thinking about how I can use this in my own work.
That's great. The six-question framework is really a great tool for anyone in medical affairs.
I think this framework alone has been worth the deep dive, but I know there's more.
Oh, yeah.
The expert in these videos also talks about going beyond the science, right?
Yes.
Like, what other skills do you need to really have business acumen in medical affairs?
That's a great question, and it takes us into a really interesting area. So it's about, you can be the most brilliant scientist in the world,
Right.
but if you don't get the market, the competition, the regulations,
Right.
you're kind of working in the dark.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to get through a maze blindfolded, right?
Exactly.
You might eventually get there, but it's going to be way harder.
Exactly. You need to see the whole picture. So understanding market trends, that's crucial.
No.
Is the market for, your type of therapy growing or shrinking?
Right.
Are there, new treatments coming out that could disrupt the market?
Right. So it's more than just reading those scientific journals.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
It's industry reports, it's conferences, it's talking to people in the field.
Yeah, for sure. And then, don't underestimate understanding the competition.
Right.
Who are your main competitors? What are they good at? What are they not so good at?
Right.
What are their strategies?
It's like a game of chess, isn't it?
Exactly.
You've got to try and figure out their next move.
Right.
And then plan your own.
And just like in chess, you got to be adaptable. Pharma is constantly changing. New regulations, new technology, new discoveries all the time.
Right.
Medical affairs professionals need to be able to keep up with that, to be flexible.
That reminds me of something I saw a few years ago.
Yeah.
There was this medical affairs team, and they'd put together this really comprehensive program for this new drug. But then the FDA, they issued a new safety warning that really limited how the drug could be used.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a tough spot.
So what happened?
Well, they had to basically redo the whole program.
Wow.
Working with the regulatory team, understanding those new guidelines with the marketing team, changing the message.
Yeah.
And then they had to re-educate the sales team, too.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
But they managed to, adapt and change their strategy.
That's a great example of adaptability in action.
It was. It showed how important it is to stay informed, be flexible, and work together, across different teams.
Right.
And speaking of working together, the expert in these videos really emphasizes how important these cross-functional partnerships are, especially with commercial teams.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that so important?
Well, medical affairs and commercial teams often see things differently. They have different priorities, which can lead to, tension, misalignment.
Yeah.
Medical affairs, they're focused on the science, the data, the evidence,
Yeah.
while the commercial teams are focused on sales and market share.
It's like they're speaking different languages sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember working on a project, and the medical affairs team had created these super detailed scientific presentations
Okay.
for this new drug launch. But the sales team, they found them, way too complicated.
Yeah. That happens a lot. What did you guys do?
Well, there was a lot of frustration at first, on both sides.
Sure.
The medical affairs team felt like their expertise was being ignored.
Right.
And the sales team, they felt like they weren't getting the support they needed.
Yeah.
But then we tried something different. We got both teams together for these workshops
Right.
where they could actually learn from each other.
That sounds interesting. Did it work?
It did, actually.
Yeah.
The medical affairs team learned to tailor their messages to the sales team
Okay.
and how to make the complicated stuff easier to understand. And the sales team, they got a better grasp of the science
Uh-huh.
and how to explain the value of the drug better.
That's a great outcome. It shows what can happen when you have good communication and collaboration.
And it does.
When medical affairs and commercial teams work together well, they can create a really powerful approach that benefits everyone, especially the patients.
Yeah, it's like this well-rehearsed dance, right? Everyone knows their steps and they move together perfectly.
Exactly.
And when we talk about building these bridges, you can't forget about the KOLs, the key opinion leaders.
Right.
The expert in these videos talks about how business acumen actually helps when you're working with KOLs. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. KOLs, they're super influential in the medical world,
Oh, yeah.
and engaging with them strategically is key for medical affairs.
Uh-huh.
But it's not just about finding the biggest names and inviting them to speak at conferences.
Right.
You have to approach KOL engagement with a business mindset.
So it's not just about geeking out over their research. It's about having real interactions that actually help the business.
Exactly. You got to ask yourself, what are we trying to get out of this? Are we looking for their input on a clinical trial design?
Mm-hmm.
Do we want them to teach other doctors about a new treatment?
Right.
Are we hoping they'll advocate for our product with the FDA?
So you're treating them as partners, not just, famous people.
Precisely. And it's a partnership that should benefit both sides. You need to understand what they're interested in, what their expertise is, who they influence. And you need to be able to show how your product or research fits into their work and the bigger market.
So it's about building a relationship, not just a one-time thing.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting. When medical affairs professionals really understand business, they can explore new ways of working with KOLs that go beyond the usual stuff.
Oh, like what? Give me an example.
Well, imagine working with KOLs on market research
Okay.
to get a deeper understanding of what patients need and how they're being treated. Or teaming up with them on patient advocacy programs to raise awareness about a certain disease.
Wow, I see how that opens up a lot of new possibilities. It's not just about sharing science anymore.
Right.
It's about strategic partnerships that lead to new ideas and, in the end, help patients.
Exactly. And that's what makes this field so exciting. It's always changing, and there's always more to learn.
It's like, we've been focusing on how business acumen's changing how medical affairs people work with KOLs.
Right.
And it's not just about, tapping into their scientific knowledge anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's about these strategic partnerships that can, drive innovation
Yeah.
and really make a difference for patients.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting how this whole making a difference thing keeps popping up.
It really is at the core of medical affairs, isn't it? It's not just about, analyzing data and writing reports. It's about trying to improve lives.
Right.
And that's where this business acumen becomes so powerful. It helps us take those scientific advances and turn them into real benefits for patients.
I'm thinking back to that 6-question framework we talked about.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about making smart business decisions. It was about making decisions that actually helped patients.
Right.
It's almost like business acumen and being patient-centric are two sides of the same coin.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
They're definitely connected, not, opposed to each other.
Right.
When you really understand the business world, what the market needs, what the regulations are,
Right.
you're in a much better position to advocate for patients, to make sure they have access to the treatments they need, and to shape the future of healthcare in a way that really benefits them.
That's a really powerful way to think about it.
Yeah.
It's not just about profits and market share.
Right.
It's about using business savvy to create a healthcare system that really puts patients first.
Exactly. And as the healthcare landscape keeps changing, that link between business acumen and medical affairs is only going to become more important.
Right.
We're seeing personalized medicine becoming more common. Digital health technologies are on the rise. There's more and more pressure on healthcare costs.
Yeah, it feels like the pace of change is just getting faster and faster.
It is.
So how can people in medical affairs keep up with all of this?
Well, I think the most important thing is to have a mindset of continuous learning.
Okay.
The skills that were just, nice to have a few years ago are now absolutely essential.
So things like what? Data analysis, digital literacy, understanding healthcare economics?
Exactly.
Okay.
Medical affairs professionals need to be comfortable working with huge amounts of data, understanding complex analytics, and knowing how healthcare is paid for and delivered.
It sounds like the role is getting more and more complex.
It is.
It's not just about being a scientific expert anymore.
Right.
It's about being a strategic thinker, a communicator, a data analyst, a collaborator.
That's right. And I think that's what makes it so exciting, It's challenging, it's always changing, and it gives you this unique opportunity to make a real impact where science and business meet.
Yeah, and I think our deep dive into these videos has really shown us that. So as we wrap up, is there one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I would say embrace business acumen as an essential tool for making a real difference in medical affairs.
Okay.
It's not about forgetting your scientific expertise.
Right.
It's about adding to it with strategic thinking and a deep understanding of the business world we're working in.
It's about using everything you know to advocate for patients, shape the future of healthcare, and make a real difference.
That's it.
That's a great way to end this.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, check out the full videos from the Skyhealth Learning Academy on YouTube.
Yeah, they're great.
They're an awesome resource for anyone who wants to, really get this whole business acumen thing in medical affairs.
For sure.
And as always, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep making a difference.